This story begins with one girl before an important meeting, trying to choose the right clothes to wear, and decided to ask advice from Uncle Carl, who was completely uninterested. He told her it's just clothes, so there's no point in bothering and spending a lot of time on it. He didn't realize that it was important for the girl, because it was a big part of her life. She wanted to feel more confident in her clothes. After a while, he got sick of it, so he decided to just go outside. And when the other Uncle Hank saw him, he asked what was wrong, and got the answer that Carl didn't want to be a part of it because it made him nervous. The girl understood that, but even so, it was more important for her to decide on an outfit, to be sure that she would look good. But it seems that even Uncle Hank was getting tired of it as well, so he started to hurry her along. It turns out it didn't matter to her how long it took. It was all about pleasing Fabian, the scenery of the forest that had become familiar, the smell of the earth and the fine sparks that burst from the small fire to be built near the tents. After Hank picked her up as a child, the girl didn't like places like this, since she'd been an errand boy. But there was something she missed, one man's promise to make her happy, and when he had saved up a lot of money he would get to her to marry her. The day of Fabian's promise had come. When he was on his way up, everybody got ready for it and got in their seats. This guest was so important that even who stood where and what he should say was controlled. The moment has come. Fabian finally steps out of the carriage and it's time to greet him. When the girl saw him, she finally saw how handsome he was. Plus, he had become much more masculine since the last time they had seen each other. But it turns out he didn't come alone. He had a girl with him. And that a lot of people really didn't expect it, and were a little surprised to see her show up. Especially Lady Riella, who was only waiting for her lover. But things clearly did not happen as she had imagined. This girl was a princess. She behaved politely enough and immediately thanked Mr. Hank for his efforts. After that, she turned her attention to Riel. It was their first meeting. They'd never seen each other before. The girls began to get acquainted, greeted each other. The princess said her name was Greta. She said that Fabian had told her a lot about Riel, and that she'd been looking forward to seeing him for a long time. To which the girl reacted ambiguously, for it was not clear to her what relations there were between Fabian and Princess Greta. After they met, the princess said they could meet up later that evening and get to know each other better. Riella thought about it all the time after that, for she was very uncomfortable seeing them together. So she was a little upset because she didn't know if Fabian still had feelings for her. When suddenly the girl heard someone approaching her, but she wasn't expecting anyone. It turned out to be Fabian. Riella asked him what he had come for she thought he had left with the princess, to which he replied that he had just forgotten something. At this, of course, she did not hold back, and began to hug him joyfully, for they had not seen each other for a long time. Since Fabian hadn't warned her he was coming, he had a surprise as an apology. It was an incredibly beautiful flower, and it turned out to be an unusual and special. The girl has no idea how he managed to find Vivian's rose, because it's almost impossible. Riel was insanely pleased to receive it, for she had imagined how difficult it had been. On top of that, the girl realized, he had to travel a very long distance with him, all for her to just smile and thank him for it. Meanwhile, it was dinner time and Fabian had to leave, and it didn't upset the girl, because she was happy after the gift, so it was impossible to spoil her mood. Over dinner, they were discussing future plans, but that was hard to answer. So the uncle just talked about the fact that this was the first time he was getting such a big reward, so still in contemplation. But still everyone was confident that he could defeat the mercenary, though it wouldn't be easy. Afterward, the princess offered to resettle all in the capital, and she was willing to provide a residence for all who wished to. It's like a thank you for all of them trying their best to help the royal family. At this moment, Riella was waiting for Fabian to say that they were going to get married. At one point, the princess decided to ask what Riella thought of her idea, to which she replied that it was very nice of her to do so. But for some hint of a wedding, Riella said she'd love to move in, but she still has some plans to make. And with that, she was very interested in the princess. But she didn't know if she should tell everyone without the guy's consent. It was obvious that he didn't exactly want the girl to talk about it ahead of time. He made it clear to her with his expression and his look. Then she knew it was too soon to tell, and she had to keep it a secret. When the princess saw that the girl didn't quite want to talk about it, she apologized, and said she didn't want to make her uncomfortable and demand any information. To which Riella said that Greta had nothing to apologize for, to which the princess replied that she was indeed grateful to Riella for many things. And yet, as a result, the princess apologized to the girl in front of everyone, And of course Riella accepted it, and said it wasn't necessary. Afterward, Greta wished everyone a pleasant appetite, and thanked them for the long-awaited meeting. It had been a long time since they had started dinner, and everyone was very full. Even after all this time, each of them was frantically worried, because they had to make a good and correct impression. At some point, the princess and Fabian went off somewhere, and didn't return for a long time, much to Rielle's dismay. When she thought of them, it was not clear to her who they were to each other, for from the outside they looked like a couple, though the girl realized that it could not be. At least she hoped so. It was strange to her when the princess apologized for something, and was grateful. But the main thing she kept thinking about was why she and Fabian were on such good terms. She suspected they might be in a relationship, but she hoped they weren't. If that were true on the guy's part, it would be very unkind to Rielle, because he's given her a lot of hope, and all she does is dream of getting married, so she's not happy to see any girl near him. To calm down and be sure of something, she decided to find them, because they were suspiciously long gone. The first place she decided to go was the carriage they came in, but there was no one in it. The girl had no idea what she was about to see, and maybe the idea of looking for them wasn't a good one, and now she was going to make sure of it. When she looked around, heard that there was someone nearby, and decided to go there, and see who's there at this late hour, except she's not going to like what she sees. It was something she didn't want to see even in her worst dream. There stood Fabian and the princess. Riella saw them kissing, and in that moment she felt the most unpleasant feelings, for it was a betrayal. This sweet girl could barely keep from crying, but unfortunately, in a situation like this, it's impossible. Riella trusted him so much, waited for him all this time, dreamed of a wedding and a happy relationship, and the first time she met him, she saw him with another girl. It was too humiliating and unpleasant. It was hard for her to watch, but at the same time she couldn't leave, though it was vile enough to look at. If she hadn't seen them now, she would have continued to believe that he truly loved her. At that moment, he didn't even apologize to her, and continued to stand next to the princess as if nothing had happened. She felt like he wasn't ashamed of it at all, and didn't care about her feelings at that moment. He couldn't even imagine how she felt the moment she saw the man she loved madly with another girl. And all this after he gave her a flower not too long ago and promised her a lot of things? He really doesn't even deserve her attention after that. Riella didn't know what was better, to start talking to him about it, or to just walk away silently and forget him forever. They've known each other so long that she couldn't imagine this situation ever happening. When the princess left, he started apologizing, and telling Rielle that it wasn't what she thought it was, and he still loves her very much. Those words were so nasty, she didn't even want to hear them, but then he realized that the girl didn't believe him. So he confessed everything and said he would soon leave with the princess for the palace. The girl told him that she really hoped it was just a joke, or a dream, to which he replied that he no longer loved her, and would live with the princess. Riella began to cry, and told him how he could do this to her, for she had not expected this from him. She reminded him how he used to promise her that they could marry someday, and how they dreamed of a happy and shared life together. When suddenly, at that moment, the people who were left waiting for them at the table come up to them. Her uncle was there, asking if she was all right because he was worried sick, so he went looking for her. When she told him everything, the girl hoped for support, but he said there was nothing wrong with it, and also that nothing will change if she keeps being sad and crying, so she just needs to let him go. Her uncle didn't seem to be on her side, and for some reason tried to protect the princess and Fabian. Riella asked him if he meant to say that she was the one doing the wrong thing right now, to which he replied that he partially agreed. After all, there was nothing wrong with liking the princess and falling out of love with Riella. He was completely unsupportive of her, and didn't even try to understand how she was feeling right now. Everyone was against her, and didn't understand why she was getting upset. It turned out that everyone but the girl had known about it for a long time, so it wasn't news to anyone. It turns out that the reward given by the princess was payment for Fabian making her happy. Now it made sense to her what the princess was thanking her for. I'm sure she didn't want to find out this way, but unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. When the girl was about to leave, a guy came up to her and asked her not to leave, because he had something to tell her. But I guess it was too late, because he'd made his choice a long time ago and didn't think about her feelings. He humiliated her in front of everyone, and he's trying to talk to her about something, The most frustrating thing for her was that absolutely everyone in the situation was supporting him, which she didn't expect. When the girl decided to leave them, her uncle told her she didn't even have anywhere to go, so there was no need to act offended. It was as if no one could see what this guy had done to her. Even her own uncle, for some kind of gain, was turning a blind eye to it. After being betrayed by Fabian, she had no desire to see anyone, so she went to the river. There was a cute guy sitting nearby watching it. He immediately noticed such a cute and pretty girl and started watching her. The guy saw that she was obviously hurt by someone, because she had tears in her eyes. When he realized what she was there for and what she was going to do, he didn't ignore it, because he wanted to help her somehow, and if necessary, to save her. At that moment, because of emotions, she did not control herself and did not realize the consequences. So I got up right away and I wanted to go over to her. But unfortunately I didn't have time. It was too late. The girl couldn't bear the betrayal and found the only way to get rid of the bad thoughts. That guy immediately ran over to where she was standing and didn't know what to do for the first time. He had a hunch that maybe someone really hurt her and she just couldn't take it. He had two choices: help her and save her, or stay out of it because it was none of his business. But still, he genuinely wanted to help her. After all, it wasn't her best decision to deal with some problems. After that, he didn't think for a second and went straight to her rescue. The guy knew for sure that no matter what she said to him afterward, he'd done the right thing anyway. At such a difficult moment, he decided to give her a chance at a new life, and it would be something like a new page, which should be better than the previous one. Luckily, after she was in the water, it was a little while before she had a chance to breathe. He really cared a lot about this girl, and genuinely wanted her to be okay. All the people around her had no idea what made her decide to do this, and solve problems in such a horrible way. And surprisingly, none of them even came up to them and offered their help. It was like they were ignoring the situation to take it easy. As suddenly, among those people, someone was trying to sneak in and get closer. That person wanted to say something, and when he did, he said that this girl, his little sister, and it turned out that this man, he wanted to take her away and pretended to be a relative. But why he did it is unclear. He was acting too suspicious, and he didn't look like her brother, more like some villain who was taking advantage of the situation. When her rescuer saw that the suspicious brother wasn't even upset when he found out what had happened, he wondered if he should even trust him and let the girl go with him. And after that, he said she wasn't going anywhere with him. He wanted proof that they were really brother and sister. The girl's savior told him he wasn't going to trust him, and to give him a chance, he asked him what his sister's name was, if it was true. This doubtful brother could not answer the question, and spoke some strange names, when the people around him also began to suspect him of being a stranger to her. They thought that maybe he was a kidnapper and wanted to make some kind of profit after he left with her. After a while, the guy definitely stopped trusting that stranger, and was sure he wouldn't give the girl to him. Because of that, that crook got nervous and anxious. He realized he'd never make it, and the girl would stay with the guy, who truly and sincerely wishes her well, unlike him. When the chill had already stopped outside, the guy decided to take care of her, so he ordered something to his assistants, and for this, of course, he gave thanks. It was important to him that clothes and a comfortable room should be prepared for the girl, and also, he ordered that no suspicious or strangers who might harm her should be allowed in on any occasion. In this situation, the most important thing he wanted to take care of was her safety first and foremost. When the helpers were rewarded, they were happy to get on with all their tasks. The guy had to carry her in his arms because the girl was still unconscious, and at this time he wondered why she had realized such a rash decision. Had something really serious happened to her? In this situation, there was one small problem. If Asian found out about him being with some stranger far away from the palace, there could be trouble. As he watched her, he noticed what a pretty girl she was, and was very happy that he would soon be able to meet her. He had a lot of options as to why she might have jumped into the water, but he still wanted to know the real reason. After a while, he decided to go about his business for a while when suddenly, she seemed to wake up. She touched his leg and asked him not to leave, and to stay by her side. He was simultaneously insanely happy about it, but at the same time, he didn't expect her to come to her senses so quickly. When she tried to get out of bed so he wouldn't leave, the guy said she couldn't get up. He began to feel very nervous, for he had to think of how to behave in this situation. Riella told him that she would be very scared to stay here alone, in a stranger together, when suddenly she touched his arm, and he felt something strange, for it had never happened before. Her touch made him nervous, and at the same time think that she was some kind of special. From her touch, something inexplicable was happening, something he couldn't quite understand. He had a feeling that she was some special girl who might have some kind of power. It seemed to him that even her look wasn't like any other ordinary girl's. Because of this, he was insanely curious to know what her specialty was, and why it was so hard for him to walk away from her. She was like a magnet that attracted him very strongly, but maybe the reason was because he just liked her. She was really an incredibly beautiful and sweet girl that no guy who knew her wanted to leave her. The moment he was near her, it was as if he had forgotten his own affairs and troubles. After meeting her, he knew for sure that she was the only one like her, and there was no girl in the whole world who was even a little like her. When the guy looked into her eyes, he had ambiguous feelings. He was both excited and had a sense of affection. He even thought that maybe she was just a witch. Because of that, with some kind of power, she wouldn't let him go away from her. As a friend, he realizes that it's as if she can't hear or see him, as if she's still unconscious. At one point he touched her, and was surprised that her body was too cold, even though the room was warm enough. After that, she sharply closes her eyes, and as if she starts to fall asleep, which scared him very much. The guy didn't know what to do in this situation at all. Normally, he'd never been so worried about a person, much less some girl he didn't know. Everyone knows him as an unemotional person who never gets worked up over other people. He even wondered at one point when he had turned into such a caring and gentle man. Plus, he noticed that he didn't feel any danger or anxiety around her, despite the fact that something strange was happening to her. Next day came. Early in the morning, the girl finally awoke and felt some warm fragrance of the. She saw a boy beside her, but did not yet know that he was her savior, who had guarded her all night and been by her side. Because she wasn't fully awake yet, Riella thought it was Fabian. Turns out she remembered jumping into the water yesterday, so she wondered why it was so warm and cozy, and how she ended up in a nice warm room with some guy the next morning. And when Riella saw him holding her hand and sleeping at the same time, it was a surprise to her, because it was a little hard for her to remember what happened after she jumped in the water. And of course she couldn't help but notice how handsome and very cute this guy was. So it even made her feel good to think that maybe he was the one who had saved her. While he slept, the girl had time to remember what had happened the night before. Riella regretted very much that, succumbing to feelings of sadness and betrayal, she had behaved so foolishly. But she's saved from this terrible mistake by a guy she's very grateful to for giving her a new life, that she foolishly almost lost, all because of the betrayal of one man who didn't deserve it. Riella thought for a long time about what she should do at this point. It was insanely embarrassing to have done such a stupid thing and also in front of him. So the first thing she decided to do was just run away before he woke up. But at the same time, the girl realized that it would be rude to him, for he had given her a new life, and doesn't even deserve to be thanked for it. The girl thought it would be better and more proper to thank him or apologize. It was such a terrible thing to do that he might think she was a very stupid girl. But for some reason afterward, she even thought that maybe he should be blamed for bringing her back to this horrible life. And this, she wanted to do even more than thank him for his good deed, which was very strange and wrong of her to do. Somewhere in the forested wilderness of the southern expanse of the kingdom of Lyotta, a bar called Fernie's. Riella is already working as a waitress, and it's been a long time since then. She's finally got her life together. She's just working and having fun. The hard fall and winter passed. The next spring came, and the wounds that seemed like they would never heal became less painful. And after Riella escaped to this village, she finally began to remember less of the past. But one day, they decided to come back for her. The girl thought they were just another guests and visitors to the bar, but unfortunately, they were uninvited guests. She knew they weren't just here for a few drinks. They were looking for her with their eyes, to take her with them, and bring her back to the place from which she had fled. Riella realized exactly that there was no way she could avoid it this time, so there was no point in resisting and trying to escape. They came for her to take her to the kingdom of Lyotta. There was a woman who tried to negotiate for her, but she didn't know her, so it was useless. These people said that the girl is accused of destroying the Elschwag Empire's emperor, so if this woman doesn't want to be taken away as an accomplice, she'd better not fight back. Riella didn't understand at all why she was being accused of anything. After all, She had just run away and lived a normal, quiet life, when suddenly, for some reason, she had a vision of Fabian's face that she didn't even want to know or ever see again. Afterward, Riella remembered very well what they had said to her the last time she had seen them. Their words were the most hurtful thing she had ever heard, and to meet those people again, she never wanted to. But it turns out that no one gave her a choice, and the people who got the orders are going to take her there anyway. And the most frustrating part was that no one even had to ask her opinion or consent to do it. And at that moment, there wasn't a single person who could help her, or keep her away from these people, so she could finally live her life in peace. Riella thought that when she managed to escape from there, she would never have to see those people again, and hate every day that followed. But this horror that was before, it continues. Instead of being comfortably transported to the Empire, she had to be confined on a cold floor. And even after being betrayed and humiliated, the girl still hoped Fabian would come back for her and set her free, which of course was a very foolish thing to hope for. The man who did that to her was incapable of anything better towards her, and most likely will never change, and certainly won't think to apologize for what he did. As hard as it is for her to get over him, she needs to realize that the sooner she does, the sooner she'll feel better. After a while, Riella had given up hope that anyone needed her, or that it was even possible to start enjoying life someday. When the girl was in a special enclosed place, she was very cold, and because of this, she sometimes fainted. And then she realized that no miracle had happened. No one had even tried to help her after all this time. A few days later, the day came when she was to be shown to a distinguished man. When he arrived, everyone began to greet him, for he was a very distinguished guest. There was that princess, and maybe even Fabian, who probably don't even remember what they did to Riel. No wonder if they were able to forget about it a few days later, and didn't regret what they had done. The only thing they wanted was for everything to go according to plan. It turns out that the guy who saved Riel once, he's the Emperor. And he's the one who came to be shown the girl, so everyone gets what they need. They greeted each other, and the Emperor thanked for the invitation. Everyone tried to treat each other with respect, and as politely as possible so as not to spoil the meeting in any way. It was important for each of them to get what they wanted or benefited from this conversation. You could see how hard it was for everyone to pretend to be happy for each other, and not really smile. As suddenly, the princess suggested we take a walk around the palace, and afterwards start a welcoming celebration in his honor, to which he replied that he wanted to first make sure that the transfer of the kingdom to his control was successful. And right after that, he said he'd like to see that girl. It was very important to him for some reason, so he asked to see her as soon as possible. And of course, no one could refuse him, and they just asked him to wait a little while. After a while, the Emperor will finally see this girl, and I wonder if he'll recognize her. Besides, it would be nice if the Emperor knew that because of all these people, he had to save her once. The Emperor did not have to wait long, and a few minutes later he saw the girl being led to the... These two wanted to give her to the Emperor as soon as possible, and get something in return. The princess said the sooner they could get rid of it, the better. When the girl was brought to the Emperor, he probably didn't even recognize her because you couldn't see her face. He was told that the girl was completely at his disposal, so he could do whatever he wanted to do. When the Emperor drew his sword, everyone rejoiced, especially the princess, who had been waiting for it. It was the most welcome moment for her. No matter how she hid it, it was still obvious that she didn't like Riella. But the Emperor wasn't the type to be as cruel as the princess, for example. Even though he drew his sword, he wasn't going to do anything bad to her. Because personally, this girl didn't do anything wrong. All she did was try to run away to finally be safe. For trying to punish her in this way. Except she doesn't deserve to be treated so horribly. At one point, the Emperor asked the girl to show her face and look him in the eye. He did not yet know that this girl was not guilty of anything, and who she really was, and the fact that they knew each other. But it looks like he'll recognize her soon, and maybe he can rescue her and take her with him from this place. The Emperor, who suddenly disappeared and then returned 10 years later, Herrn Linhart von Wilsbach. Many said that he entered the throne of the Elshwick Empire quite peacefully, but few know how much effort it took for peace. Despite his status, he was a fair enough and relatively kind man. So first he'd like to look her in the eye to see what she looks like. The Emperor once again asked her to raise her head and look at him normally, and when he saw her face, the first thing he noticed was her thin body. The Emperor knew at once that she had been underfed here, and on that account, he reprimanded the people responsible for it. The princess and her father were embarrassed in front of him, Though the emperor had said all right, they had no right to restrict the girl in eating. All the people standing around were very much surprised to see the emperor try to defend the girl and complain that she was given little food. They felt like he was on her side in this situation, which is something no one expected. And at that moment, standing beside them was the princess and her lover, because of whom the girl was now in this position. Fabian decided to read out the report of her crime, to make it clearer to the emperor why she should be punished. He had read about Riella being charged with a plot to destroy the emperor, organized last fall in the eastern region of the empire, but it seems that the emperor didn't like something in his words and got very angry. Maybe he realized it was the girl whose name he remembered, and it may have become obvious to him that she was going to be framed and undeservedly punished. Fabian was starting to get very worried at this point, as things weren't going according to their plan. When the princess realized that it looked like they were about to get into trouble, she also got angry. She also began to suspect and assume that the emperor seemed to have guessed everything and did not believe them. It was obvious that he didn't mean to hurt the girl. Even looks like he's trying to protect her because he didn't want to believe any words. He needs proof that she's really guilty of something. When suddenly Riel suddenly felt sick and fell to the floor from unconsciousness. But even after that, no one around her came up to her and wanted to help her in any way. And at this time, the princess only hoped that the emperor would still want to destroy her, and still believe them after all. But she is very much mistaken, for not everyone is as evil as she and everyone around her is. When each of them saw that the emperor wasn't going to believe them, they began to have a sense of excitement, and it looked like he was going to punish them for lying instead of the girl. At that moment, something happened that no one could have predicted. The emperor, even in this situation, decided to help her, and took the girl in his arms. He felt sorry for her, for she looked so lonely and weak that he wanted to fix it. It is obvious that the girl couldn't stand it and passed out because she was given little food and was in poor conditions. He said that the girl's health had deteriorated very much, and he did not even conceal the fact that he suspected all their... Of course no one liked it, because no one thought that the emperor would not take everyone's word for it, and would turn out to be a fair person unlike them, who doesn't care that much about other people, and won't ignore when someone feels bad, even if he's the emperor. Everyone started telling him he should be tougher and not feel sorry for some girl who didn't deserve it, to which he replied that if anyone else said one word to him, what he had to do to the girl, he would do to them. So they will regret it very much if they doubt his words and judgment. After a while, the emperor wondered how the girl who had been taken ill was feeling. It turns out he even had a picture of her that he used to look at sometimes. Some time ago, he asked me to take her to the hospital to get her looked after and help her improve her health. But unfortunately she's still unconscious. A little later, it was reported to the emperor that the girl had been without food for a long time, and that this was done on purpose to make her feel worse. It's long been clear to him that the royal family did keep her in horrible conditions. The royal police reports on Riel Blint as the only suspect were just perfect to say the least. All the details were well laid out, and even the evidence was too much to handle. However, the facts of the surveillance of Herhan, the crown prince, led by Riella and some company who were in league with her, were far from the truth. There's a suspicion that this is just a conspiracy where everyone is out for personal gain, but no one could have predicted that all the blame would fall on the girl. To which the aide said he agreed with the royal family and the girl should be punished. Upon which the emperor asked his aide whether he did not know the real truth and could trust the royal family. As suddenly, the aide began to get very angry, the entire emperor questioning his words for the first time after many years. But the thing is, when the emperor is unsure about something, it's important for him to get to the bottom of the situation first, only then to punish the truly guilty person. Not blindly believing some word that says this pretty girl could betray an entire royal family and the empire. When the emperor ordered him to go to the girl's hospital to follow her and see how she was doing, that fellow didn't want to do it, but he had no choice, and it was an order. So no matter how much he didn't want to, he had to go there. Meanwhile, the princess had learned that one of the emperor's messengers was lying in a hospital bed. But the one thing they were all waiting for was that someday the emperor would destroy the girl after all. Only they couldn't even talk about it out loud so no one would suspect anything. Greta couldn't understand who this girl even needed to help, and how she deserved help from the emperor himself. She even wondered if he might have found out that it was the princess who had ordered the knights to destroy her. Every time she thought about it, she started to get more and more nervous, because if things didn't go according to plan, this girl could be in her shoes. When suddenly, unexpectedly, her lover approaches her. Greta didn't expect him to approach her at that moment. He came to support his beloved, for whom he'd traded Riel. He doesn't seem to care how much moral pain he caused the girl, and how long it took her to forget his terrible act. Maybe he didn't want to destroy his ex-girlfriend as much as the princess wanted him to, and if it wasn't for her, he probably wouldn't be in favor of it. But since they're a couple, he has no choice. She even thought that maybe she should act before Riella woke up. It would be much easier and quicker. Just what she meant by that was unclear at the moment. The Emperor's aide told me that she had said absolutely nothing, and was unlikely to say anything anytime soon. To which some girls said that they are on the side of the accused, so it is natural for them to be afraid and silent. But if they spend a little more time and try to convince her, something might work out. It had been 3 days since she had regained consciousness, and the assistant believed that the girl might soon have something to say to the... After all, if she tells them something, it will be much easier to defend her if she really isn't guilty of anything. They also began to remember that the first time they met, the girl was not afraid to keep quiet, and only from the third time listened to the Emperor when he asked to look at him. There must be some reason for that, but no one's found out yet. The Emperor sincerely wanted to make sure that the royal family was simply deceiving him, and set up this situation as if it was all the girl's fault, for him to destroy it as soon as possible, and it was not on their consciences, but on his, as Emperor of the... And luckily, despite everyone trying to convince him of her betrayal, he believed no one and decided to see for himself. After the conversation, his aide saw that the Emperor was going somewhere, and decided to ask where exactly, to which he replied that he wanted to talk to Riella in person. He actually really wanted to have a sincere conversation with her, and get her opinion on who was really trying to deceive him. Except that he asked not to be followed, so as not to show anyone that the Emperor was leaving the palace. He was looking forward to meeting Riella, and maybe there, he'd finally remember her, and they'd talk things over like old friends. He truly believed that she hadn't done anything to hurt anyone, as she didn't seem like some kind of villain who needed to do so. As he passed some girls, heard them discussing her, and noticed that even they were set against her. It's like someone made them believe that Riel was bad and something to hate for. These girls were also talking about how they just wish Riel would get kicked out and they'd never see her again. Meanwhile, he had come at last to the girl, and was impatient to get some word from her. The Emperor said he imagines she's had a hard time here. But if she's really innocent, a lot could depend on this conversation. Plus, it's possible that even now he doesn't recognize the girl he once saved and has never seen since then. You could see how hard it was for her to confide in someone and tell them something. She was afraid of it. Because I'm used to not trusting anyone and thinking there's no one I can trust to tell me something personal, after all that she had had to endure and suffer. But still the Emperor had not given up hope that they might talk. When suddenly, one very interesting moment happened. A guy came up to her, and he started looking her right in the eye, and he was too close to her. But the girl didn't even resist, and maybe they liked each other. And thanks to this meeting, a lot of things will change. Perhaps at that moment he was behaving as he felt and wanted. And the fact cannot be excluded that he would not be doing it now if she were not sympathetic to him. But still, it's a bit wrong of him in such a situation, because it might seem like he's just taking advantage of the Emperor's status, and that's why he lets himself act like that. But I wonder if the girl's okay with it too, because she hasn't pushed him yet, and she keeps looking him straight in the eye, as suddenly, the Emperor wondered what it was really disrespectful of him to her. When he went back to his office where his aides were waiting for him, everyone thought that he was about to tell something interesting, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Plus, everyone saw the look on his face, and realized he didn't want to tell them anything. He showed that he was not yet in the mood for conversation, for there was much to consider and conclude. All of his aides noticed that he must have learned something during his conversation with Riella, but he wasn't ready to share the information with them. As suddenly, he asked to arrange a meeting with the head of the kingdom tonight, and to make sure everyone was sure to attend, to which the aide replied that dinner had already been prepared for them, so they would not have to think of anything, to which the Emperor ordered that this dinner would be organized by them personally, and ordered the food to be prepared from the food that he personally brought from the Empire, and said it was very important to the... He explained that since they owed the royal family a debt of gratitude, to which his aides said they would try to make arrangements with the kingdom. But that wasn't all the Emperor wanted to tell him. There was something else important enough for which he asked him to stay behind. He asked if Ashen remembered how 7 years ago they took in people who had surrendered to them, to which the aide replied that he remembered it very well, except that he did not understand the Emperor's purpose in telling him this, or what he meant by it. It turns out that those people were given a drink that made it impossible for them to tell anyone the truth, and it turns out that this situation seemed similar to his. After a little while, the king learned that the Emperor was going to have his own dinner, to which he was inviting the entire royal family. The king thanked him for it, to which the Emperor replied that since he was delayed, he had decided to have a little celebration, and would be glad if everyone enjoyed it. When the princess began to wonder why the Emperor had suddenly decided to have this dinner on his own, because he humiliated them on the first day, asked them to cancel all the food the royal family had prepared, and for some reason, he decided to treat them to his own food. Also, her father said that he was very pleased with all of this, but perhaps he didn't really think so, and also noticed something odd about the Emperor's behavior. The princess began to think about why the Emperor was pretending as if he wasn't interested in anything about Riella, even though he himself was investigating and trying to learn something from her in secret from everyone else. And there was also a suggestion that maybe the girl is so afraid of everyone that she won't even tell the Emperor. So he gave up, as suddenly, he looked sharply into the eyes of the princess, and that look was not kind at all, rather the opposite. She felt a little uneasy at this point, which made her feel as uncomfortable and worried as possible. He realized that it wouldn't have happened without a reason, so she had something to hide. Then he told her that she seemed too tense, and then he asked me to bring her a cup of tea to make her feel better. But it was most likely an unusual tea, and especially for her, the Emperor said it would calm her down well, so she needed to drink it. Which of course the princess doubted, for this tea looks too suspicious for her, but she couldn't refuse him and drank the tea. Whether it was a mistake for her or not, will soon become clear. She seemed to like the taste of it, which she certainly didn't expect. There was some kind of miraculous effect afterward that really surprised her. After the girl appreciated the drink, everyone else wanted to try it too. To taste this unusual flavor, even the king himself asked for some of this wonderful drink. While they were tasting it, the Emperor was telling them that they harvest it from plantations in the southern islands, so it's not really his tea. But he left the most interesting part for later, and when everyone had drunk their tea, he told them that it was made from a poisonous ingredient, which is why it had such an unusual flavor. Except that no one understood why the Emperor offered them such tea. It turns out it wasn't as bad as they imagined. It turns out that if you don't add this flour in large quantities, it won't be a big deal. Apparently the Emperor just want to scare a little bit those who have something to hide, and who know about how such components work. And it worked out very well for him. The princess really got quite nervous when she found out that this tea could be dangerous, but it's unclear if the Emperor is going to take revenge for the way they treated the girl, since the Emperor had begun to suspect them of having overdone such a substance towards Riel, and must guess that it was better to tell him the whole truth. And he also told them that in small amounts there is no danger, but if you overdo it, you lose the ability to speak and think straight, which he thinks is what happened to Riel because of them. But that's just an assumption, and it still needs to be verified. As suddenly, he decided to ask the princess if Riella was awake, though in truth, he knew the truth of it, and decided to just check, because there was a possibility that he might be told something that wasn't true. And in this situation, he would definitely find out and draw conclusions. To which the king began to say that they were well aware of their responsibility for the mistakes they had made, and they wanted to make things right. To which the Emperor replied, "Since the enemies of the two states are here, there's no point in additional conditions," which means it requires taking responsibility for Riella's life, so he takes her with him. No wonder no one liked this decision. Everyone was just waiting for that girl to be kicked out or punished by someone else. And as a result, the Emperor himself decided to take care of her, which they had not expected at all. It turns out that Fabian is a little worried about Riel after all, and keeps asking his princess if she's going to be okay, to which she tells him it's been prepared for a long time, and he doesn't have to worry about it, and also promised him that she'd never even considered destroying her or hurting Riel much, but she still wanted revenge, especially since the Emperor had declassified her, which she didn't expect. The next day the Emperor and his several aides went to see the girl to monitor her health and how she was feeling. It turns out that she has poison in her system, and apparently someone in the royal family ordered it. While they were discussing this topic, the maids got angry, because now the emperor knows the truth. They know that someone put poison in Riella's food, and now it will be watched closely to find the villain. And they also thought about the fact that maybe the intruder had no idea they would have noticed it, and used that flower instead of any other to cover it up. After all, no one would have guessed that such a beautiful pink flower can be very dangerous to the health of any person. As it turned out a little later, the emperor recognized her the first second he saw her, but didn't give any sign to deal with the situation and save her. He wondered if he hadn't been there at that moment, or for some other reason, he'd been a few seconds late, Riella would have died. Absolutely everyone around the emperor has changed a lot this year, but this girl has remained the same. She's constantly in some kind of difficult situation, and yet she's constantly doomed to do something bad. The only thing a person can feel looking at her is constant regret, however it may sound, but it's true. She constantly has to experience life's difficulties, betrayal, lack of freedom and humiliation from everyone around her. Never had anyone believe her or try to help her. Unfortunately, she was used to it and had long since gotten over it. The emperor was the only person who wanted to help her, to finally change her fate for the better. After scrutinizing her medical condition, he ordered his assistant to take care of her and her safety, and however long it took for her recovery and treatment, he asked that no strong medicine be used as it might harm her. Even if someone didn't want to do it, they had no right to refuse the emperor. So they agreed, and said they would do everything. When suddenly, as the emperor was leaving, one of his aides came out after him to ask him something. He apologized for his question beforehand and asked, "Did something happen between him and Riella in the past that he doesn't know about yet? And does it have anything to do with why he's constantly caring for her and protecting her, and yet he's not even sure she's done anything wrong? And there's probably only one reason why he didn't tell me, because maybe this girl is cute, so he didn't want to explain. And it was the one time that Aesion didn't know something about him. But still, this was a question the emperor did not much want to answer, because he did not want any unnecessary gossip on the subject. If he starts talking, it'll be all over the empire in minutes, and he doesn't want that. So he wanted to leave so he wouldn't have to say anything unnecessary, which could happen by accident, which he wanted to avoid. Aesion didn't expect this from him, and asked why the emperor was walking away from the conversation, just because he didn't like the question. Riella, meanwhile, was still asleep. And as usual, people often dream about what or whom they are constantly thinking about. Only her dream was incomplete. The girl saw some fragments and some different parts of her life, like the many times she asked someone to stay and not leave her when things were bad or difficult, or about how she had been promised something many times and then blatantly betrayed without regretting it. And of course the princess and her evil look, which she never changed towards the girl. There were also times when even her relatives ignored the way Fabian was treating her, and she felt too alone. And most importantly, what she would like to forget and never see even in her dreams were those moments when she was waiting for Fabian and dreaming of marriage. That was ruined because of one princess who originally wanted nothing more than to ruin their relationship. She did it and she got what she wanted. Fabian fell out of love with Rielle and left her. It was not without new developments in her life. When the emperor appeared, she had some hope that she would be happy someday. The one person she trusted more than any other person, but certainly not completely. And yet the girl was insanely grateful to him for saving her and for her new life, which hadn't worked out yet, but Riella believed in it. That was the end of her dream. It certainly wasn't the one she wanted to see, but that, unfortunately, she couldn't influence in any way. The man who was looking after her, he advised her not to get out of bed to recuperate and not to exert herself unnecessarily. As a friend, Riella, why did you start acting weird and yelling a lot? It was like she was trying to tell me to get help, but for some reason she couldn't. Like she'd forgotten how to talk. After that, the girl started running for some reason, like she wanted to escape, and then they wanted to catch her to keep her calm. Even in this situation, she felt lonely. And besides, for some reason she could not say a single word. Turns out she just wanted to run to the desk to write a note, but they tried to stop her as usual, and kept her from doing anything, as if they were ignoring her on purpose. At which point the emperor walks in, who didn't understand what I was doing here, or why there was so much noise around. In his presence, no one else held her or ignored her, and a few minutes later showed him the note she had written to him, and told him that Rielle was acting very strangely, and had just wanted to run away somewhere. The emperor read this letter, in which the girl pleaded for salvation, to which he asked why she was asking him specifically, and how he could help her. He said he knew she was framed, but that didn't mean she was completely innocent. He thought she had something to do with the allegations, and yet he wanted to know why she'd asked for his help, and not someone else's, to which the girl replied that she had no other choice, and no one else would do it. The Emperor was the only man she could hope for, when all of a sudden he asks her if he'll help her, whether she would not run away this time too, as she had done a few years ago. It turns out that he really remembers everything perfectly well, and has forgotten nothing. She certainly hoped that he would agree to it. But even if he did, Riella couldn't believe it, because she's too used to the fact that no one's ever going to help her again. And no one's ever going to help her. He didn't give a definite answer, of course, but instead asked his aides to do their best to make Riella as comfortable as possible. He also reminded her that as Emperor, he would not tolerate shortcomings towards her. And a couple of days later, rumors spread throughout the palace that the Emperor had fallen in love with Rielle. It's become the biggest topic of conversation for the next few days at least. But for the most part, there were almost no people who liked the news. Most people were just jealous of Rielle. And especially this feeling was felt by the princess, who for a long time could not understand why this girl was so lucky, and what was so special about her, for which she was noticed by the Emperor himself, because of which the princess was always angry and hated everyone around her. It got to the point where even the Emperor became aware that rumors were spreading at a high rate of speed, everyone just discussing the greatest love of the age. And of course it's not without asking the Emperor if it's true or not. He's sick of all these questions, but even so, he can't get rid of them. All serious talk gradually turned to talk of things pertaining to the private life of the Emperor and his sweetheart. But those conversations had one purpose: to find out why the Emperor is protecting her and what happened between them a few years ago, which he doesn't want to tell anyone about for some reason for so long. His assistant sometimes takes offense at this, for they used to have no secrets between them, even if it was a matter of personal. So he starts manipulating and says that if the Emperor won't tell him anything, he'll just go and ask her. He's in any case determined to find out what they're hiding from him, and from all the people who are interested in it, even though it's none of their business, and they have no right to demand to be told any information about it. The assistant was sure it would be much easier to learn something from her, and she'd be quicker to say something. If she wants to, and most likely since she doesn't trust anyone, she won't, and she'll keep it a secret. But still he was afraid to go to the girl, because the Emperor might be against it, and from then on he would cease to trust him at all. In the meantime, the doctor had already come to see Rielle to see if she could talk more easily or not, because she had problems with it before. He asked her to say some letters or sounds, and it turns out her voice is almost back to normal now. As he had already ascertained that she was getting better, there was no point in staying any longer, so the doctor asked her to rest and recuperate. When she learned that the Emperor had hired a personal physician for her to monitor her health, she remembered a time when no one had ever done such a thing for her, and no one cared if she got sick or not. All the clothes, the food, the care for her health. She was insanely grateful for it all, and she didn't even know how to thank the Emperor for it. But there was still one problem that kept Riella from even leaving the room. All the people were so eager to know about her relationship with the Emperor that if they saw her, she wouldn't even be able to walk away or run away from them. But it was still necessary for the girl to come out to ask where he was now. Riella took a big risk, and still went out into the hallway, and luckily no one was there. She was a little scared to go out there because I wanted to see some disgruntled looks in her direction. Luckily she was able to make it safely to the Emperor's study, but he was not alone there. Riella didn't even know how to properly draw attention to herself so he wouldn't get angry. But at some point he noticed her, and she felt it had gone on too long, and it made her nervous. She was having trouble deciding whether or not to say hello to him first. The moment she thought of what to say to him and how to behave in his presence, it all worked itself out. After he saw that she wanted to approach him, he said he could sit down as he was about to be free, and could listen to her. But even after that, she felt too excited, especially after the gossip that concerned them being a couple of... Riella had at that moment forgotten even what she had come for, though she had understood perfectly well what she wanted to ask before that. The Emperor noticed how hard it was for her to start a conversation, so he decided to do it instead. And the first thing he decided to ask her was how she was feeling, since she had recently had trouble with her voice. To make her feel more comfortable around him, he offered to sit a little closer. Since these were the Emperor's words, she didn't refuse, and of course complied with his request. Except that for some reason, he wasn't exactly talkative and was staring constantly into some document, as if completely oblivious to her presence. Then she definitely doesn't understand how to behave in this situation, because his reaction can be ambiguous and unexpected. It turns out he was waiting for her to tell him the reason she decided to come and talk to him, but after a while, the Emperor got tired of waiting and asked if she had nothing to say, because she had come to him for something. Riella tuned in after all and asked him exactly what he wanted, but the question sounded a little unclear, and the Emperor didn't immediately understand what she meant. So I asked him to be more specific so he could answer properly. Riella told him that if there was anything he wished for, she would try to find it. The girl reminded him that he had once said he would wait for her to respond, but she didn't know exactly what to offer him yet. She had one option for that, which she decided to offer him as payment for the help he had previously done for her. The girl asked if she could offer evidence that might be of use to him in the investigation of an important case he was now engaged in. She told him that she had proof that the royal family was plotting an assassination attempt on him, and asked him afterward if that was why he kept her here. And she was right, of course. The Emperor kept her here partly for political reasons, to which he replied to her that there was already enough proof that he was right. After these words, she became insanely uncomfortable and unpleasant, to which she told him she just wanted to help, to which the Emperor said he didn't ask her to help with anything. After these words, the girl was forever convinced that it was probably not necessary to interfere in his affairs and offer any help unless he asked for it. But still, she didn't feel comfortable talking to him this time, because he was a little aggressive in a way of the word. Riella saw that it was as if he had changed towards her, and began to speak to her in a completely different way from the way he had before. She had no choice but to apologize for her words, though she only wanted to help and make things better. But it turned out to be unnecessary. He actually used to be more respectful of her, and even more polite to her than he was to other people he knew better. It seemed as if the Emperor had been persuaded by someone that he had been too good to her, at which he got even more angry, and ordered her to stop saying all that. It was as if he was getting angry for no reason, although the girl had not said anything bad or unpleasant to him. She was only trying to apologize and offer help, which he refused to do, and he did it rather rudely. Riel really didn't imagine that he would ever change his attitude towards her in a few days. And unsurprisingly, she's used to it, and it doesn't upset her as much as it did a few years ago. Afterward, he asked her what she went through before she came here, but this question was very difficult for her to answer. The Emperor was very anxious to know at what point she began to have all these difficulties and troubles. Since the girl couldn't answer all of these questions, she was uncomfortable discussing it. Her department aided the Emperor to her room so she could rest. After that, as usual, Asian began to inquire how the Emperor's day had been, hoping that he would at least tell him something. But he had only hoped in vain, for the Emperor had been too taciturn lately, because of the many problems that needed to be solved. Asian was most interested in wondering how his conversations with the girl were going, and if he had managed to learn anything interesting that would possibly help the investigation. Since he really has a lot of problems in all areas in which they can be, he even began to threaten to behave in answer to his aide. The Emperor understood that, but he had a hard time controlling it, because there was very little that was good lately, mostly some new problems popping up all the time. There is absolutely no mood to be cheerful because of them. Even Asian decided to ask him why he was being so bad to him. After all, he doesn't deserve to be treated so poorly. The thing is, despite the many other problems, the one the Emperor wanted to deal with the most was the girl. His aide suggested that maybe she was the one person his powers weren't working on. Even though he was born with a special gift, it's impossible to be able to read everyone's mind after all. But that wasn't the point. She was too closed-minded due to the fact that she was often humiliated and sold out. So it's no wonder. Now she is what she is. After talking to the Emperor, the girl went to her room and lay on her bed for a long time thinking about how he had started to treat her badly. But then she thought about the fact that she had probably trusted someone for nothing, and forgot that it was better not to do that, because it usually resulted in the same sadness and regret for having trusted someone in the first place. Fabian and the people who used to appreciate her have abandoned her and acted very traitorous towards her, and the Emperor is no different from them. Riella reflected that perhaps it was not surprising that after a while, even the Emperor himself had shown his real face. and she had only hoped in vain for him and his sincerity. Once again she was left alone, without someone's support, help, understanding, and love, which of course she has already gotten used to doing without. But it is still quite difficult, especially since she is really a very good and kind girl, unlike them, who would never do that to someone who needed help and support, or if she saw that person didn't have any friends or loved ones who could support or love her. But at the same time, she was grateful to him, for he still hadn't kicked her out of the palace, had provided her with a posh room, the best clothes, delicious food, an excellent cook, assistants, and everything else to make her feel comfortable being here. Despite the recent conversation and misunderstanding, she will always remember his kindness and generosity, which she had never received before, even from the closest people she had once trusted. When Riella decided to go back and renegotiate, she was stopped by the guards and told that she wasn't allowed in, so they wouldn't let her in, and after that they said they would need his personal authorization to do so. If they got it, only then could they allow entry. To which the girl said that she just needed to talk to the emperor urgently. It wouldn't take much time at all. At which point his assistant comes out and tells them to step back so he can go through. Riella recognized him, and thought she might be able to get through with him now, if she explained things to him, and told him she really needed it. As it happened, he helped her freely into the emperor's study, and did so without any trouble at all. Except that the guards didn't understand why their jobs had just begun to be devalued and their authority questioned, to which he told them to mind their own business. If he let someone through, it was the right thing to do.